Hey, what is up YouTube? This is Platinum Point, and I'm here to bring you guys yet again another video for you guys. Today we're going to be exploring kind of an open-ended anime discussion on why I think Oshi is actually much more deeper than a lot of people give it credit for. And it's something that a lot of people don't discuss, which is kind of the deeper themes of Oshi. And we're going to be exploring some of them. One of them is about the concept of living in bad faith. So I hope you guys enjoy this kind of discussion. So stay tuned. So before we begin, I just want to remind you guys to please hit the like button if you like these kind of videos, because as I mentioned in the beginning, this channel is not just about trading card games, but it's also about anime and my passion, my love for it. So, and I haven't done any discussions behind it. So I thought maybe I could do kind of like a formal discussion, as a lot of people you may not know is that I actually have a background in philosophy and history. So I like to do a lot of, when I watch anime, I don't just watch it for this, like, to turn off my brain. A lot of times I actually watch it and I passively kind of find connections to what I read and what I discuss in my time at college. And one of the themes that constantly kept on coming into me when I was watching specifically Oshi, was existentialism, the philosophy of existentialism, particularly in the areas of Nietzschean or Nietzschean from Friedrich Nietzsche, as well as the works of Jean-Paul Sartre. And in fact, we're going to be looking at kind of the overview of the Sartrean aspect of existentialism, because that's something that when I was watching Oshi, I kept on hearing in my head a lot of my quotes and discussions, and even like lectures related to existentialism in the French tradition. So before we even talk about the Oshi, I'm gonna just do a quick overview of who Jean-Paul Sartre is and what is, and we're gonna be exploring the three concepts that he likes to talk about, which is radical freedom, anguish, and bad faith. And then we're gonna be connecting those two in doing a character study of both Ai Hoshino and Aqua Hoshino, because those were the two characters that kept on standing out to me when I was not only rewatching seasons 1 and 2 of Oshi, but reading the manga. I kept on hearing, like, when I keep on thinking of Sartre, these two characters kept popping up constantly, and you see the themes. I see the themes every time I watch the anime, like the Sartrean themes of bad faith, radical freedom, and anguish. So quickly, who is Jean-Paul Sartre? So Jean-Paul Sartre is a French philosopher that lived in the early 20th century, born in 1905 and died in 1980. He was a famous 20th century French philosopher who wrote a lot about, again, existentialism, critical theory, even wrote various plays. And he was, for those who are whoever took a class on feminism or literature, he was also very good friends with the famous feminist scholar Simone de Beauvoir. Sorry, my French is horrible, so please do not take my pronunciations like as gospel. But this man was like one of the pivotal figures of the existentialist traditions, almost second to Nietzsche and even Camus, as they often talked about the idea of meaning in a world without God. And Sartre argues, using the Nietzschean point of reference, which is the death of God, that because there's no overarching omnipotent being shaping out and mapping the universe and mapping out every individual life, because there's no big big God in the sky. In a sense, man is free to choose how to live and define meaning for themselves. In a sense, he tries to answer the question of what happens if we don't have a God there to give us meaning in our lives. Nietzsche argues that we live in a state of nihilism when we have no meaning. But Sartre argues that instead of falling in despair, which nihilism tends to connote, we should take this opportunity to acknowledge that because there's no big deity in the sky to help us shape meaning, humans are actually born free, meaning they have the ability to choose how to live their lives. And he coins in his book, Being in Nothingness, and this is a central quote in all of his works, man is condemned to be free. Because a lot of times this freedom brings forth anxiety because we are free to make these choices. That means there's nobody there to check us. The benefit of having a God in the monotheistic tradition was that there was a endpoint, a teleological, or like a final end where mankind would be judged by their actions, by an arbitrary being. But what Sartre argues that since there is no being, we are our own judge when it comes to our own choices, our own actions, meaning for every action that we take or every path we take, because of this freedom, we have to own our own responsibilities. We have to take responsibility for our own actions. And this leads to not only a sense of anxiety because people often find freedom, this open-ended, vague freedom, very anxiety-inducing. And I, for one, have found many people who are very much, they need structure, they need some kind of existential order to orient themselves in order to give their lives meaning. But what Sartre argues is that you are limiting yourself by following other people or other systems, other ideologies, or other frameworks to map meaning, and not giving yourself the full breadth of that freedom. And in reality, it is very anxiety inducing being told and being given the knowledge that, hey, you're free to do whatever you want. It's almost as if, and it kind of parallels to this idea of the knowledge of good and evil can be almost both empowering and frightening, because if we know what is right and wrong and we're capable of making these choices and there's no one else to judge us, ultimately we are the ones to have to take accountability for our own actions. And oftentimes we're afraid to do that, so oftentimes and we create these systems, or we even called religion, it could be even politics, where we orient ourselves into this kind of ethical framework in order to help us kind of live a life of meaning, but also help us maintain a sense of accountability instead of doing it by ourselves. And Sartre really kind of layers this out in his work, is that ultimately man is free to do that. And because of that, man as in humanity has to take ownership of everything they do. So what happens is that because people are given the knowledge that they're free to do whatever they can, it causes them so much anxiety that it forces people sometimes delude themselves by trying to simplify their lives to live out certain specific roles. And this comes out into the concept of what Sartre introduces, which is bad faith, or mauvaise foi, which describes people's tendency to flee from the freedom that they have been given by deceiving themselves that they aren't really free. So one of the ways we do that, according to Sartre, is we focus on two specific categories, which is facticity, which is things that we can't control, things that are just given facts about ourselves, whether it be our body, our socioeconomic circumstances, the families that we were born into. Race is another facticity. We can't change that. So these observable kind of traits, like even like if you have a disability or you're born with certain like physical features, like your looks, we can't change those things. Those are what we would call facticity. And then there's the transcendence, our capacity to kind of work beyond it, whether through sheer effort, whether it be like obtaining certain occupations based on our own inherent abilities, or even choosing how to live certain lives based on certain kind of lifestyles based on our passion and our goals. So oftentimes transcendence is like this ability to live past it, and that can come from our passions, our goals, our desires in life. So like when you have those two aspects, the things that you can't control versus the possibilities of moving past it, when those two forces contradict one another, oftentimes people try overemphasize the facticities of their life, whether I'm poor, or I'm not good looking, I am a certain body type, or I'm a certain gender, or I'm a certain race, so I can't do these things. And oftentimes it's this obsession over the facticity is often reinforced by our environment, whether our society kind of instills like certain values based on those facticities. So oftentimes people trap themselves in those roles because they feel like that there's no other option for them. They cannot be any more than what they are. And ultimately, this leads to a person kind of living in bad faith, according to Sartre, because they don't see the fact that they can choose different options. For example, in our everyday lives, we often we wear multiple masks, we take on different roles based on whether it's our occupation, the circles we walk in, the social circles we walk into, the cultural context. We often already shift between various versions of ourselves, or various versions of our own self. But oftentimes, depending on the situation, we often obsess over just this one specific role. Like Sartre even mentions this in his book about a waiter only focusing on how to conduct himself, how to act like a waiter, how to perform and be the best waiter, that he ignores the other aspects of himself beyond his occupational role of the waiter. So Sartre would argue that when you are focused on just that one specific role that you are in, and not acknowledging the various different roles that you occupy as well, or the fact that you can occupy multiple different roles in different spheres, you, in a sense, live in bad faith. And because people tend to do this, when people live in bad faith in this kind of mindset, they develop this kind of tunnel vision, and we often see that in characters in literature, where either a character adopts a certain mindset, or they adopt a certain role and they just commit to it throughout their life. You often see it in shonen anime, where, let's say, a character experiences deep trauma and he devotes his entire life to nothing but maybe avenging that trauma, or even someone who is raised in a household where they're given an expectation that they have to be a certain way, so they focus all their entire lives to achieving and living that role, whether it be a doctor or being a lawyer or even being the head of your family. So a lot of anime tackles these kind of themes of living in bad faith, and we often see it. Like Naruto is a good example of that, where many characters are kind of forced to lock themselves in to the identities that they are. Like, for example, people try to impose the idea that Naruto cannot be anything more than a Jinchuriki. They see him as an outcast because of the facticities of his birth, being forced to bear the nine-tailed fox. So like you see like these various instances where people are almost kind of pushed into this to the condition of living in bad faith. Now we will go into Oshinoko. I just want to give a quick spoiler alert in case nobody has watched this Oshinoko or even had read the manga. I will be discussing a few things about the two main characters, because they are the biggest examples of living in bad faith in this series. And you actually kind of see the theme of bad faith perpetuating throughout it, but I just want to focus on these two characters. So you've been warned. So we're gonna start off with Ai Hoshino, the face of the series, the titular character, the one that starts the whole series. So throughout even episode 1 of season 1, we see how Ai conducts herself throughout the series. She tries to juggle her personal life and her occupation of being an idol. In fact, she even tries to hide her pregnancy in the first half of the series, and even hides the fact that she has children. And throughout that whole series, throughout that whole episode, that first episode, all you hear about from her perspective is trying to be the best idol in order to provide better outcomes and options for her children. And then throughout that series, she always emphasizes her public appearance, trying to figure out how to increase attention in order to rise up in the role in the entertainment business. And oftentimes she always parrots throughout it the central theme of her, which is lies are a form of love. So she often deceives the public about her own personal feelings, her own interests, even the fact that she has a family, and that she has twins. No, to make it worse. Not even to make it worse, but to make it even more, tenuous for her, which is the fact that she has twins that she has to support, and that she wants to be more active in their lives. So the more that she interacts with people, her coworkers, the more she tries to compartmentalize her identity between her occupational self and herself as a mother. In fact, throughout the manga and even in the anime, she struggles to tell her children that she loves them. And even when I was examining in the manga, I started to realize that she really was kind of living in bad faith, because she only saw herself as capable she can only deceive other people. She can never share the world how she truly felt. Or rather, she even found herself unable to love, or even undeserving of love to some extent. And this ultimately causes her to constantly prioritize making her kids happy, but not even talking with them as they got older, or even sharing her feelings towards them. In fact, when she dies in the series, that's the first time she says to her children that she loves them. And in the manga, she could only express her love to the father of their children in a recording that was shown posthumously, which deepens the fact that I is constantly struggles with the fact that she herself knows that she's living in bad faith, because she's constantly locking herself into those two roles. One, mainly the idol role, that she has to be the idol, the best idol ever, and she ignores the fact that she can also be a mother. She's also as the teenager, the 16-year-old, the 16, 17, 18, 19, even 20-year-old Ai. She forgoes her own desires, private desires, for the sake of being the idol, the number one idol. And ultimately ends in tragedy where she dies, and only at the moment when she dies she starts to realize that she could have chose a different path. She could have said I love you earlier to her own children. She could have opened up and expressed her emotions, but she felt like she was unable to. And that's that's what makes her tragic, and that's the tragic side of living in bad faith, is that oftentimes by deluding ourselves that we can't do all these things, we deny the possibilities that we can live different lives. And by living in bad faith as parents, for example, we can impose that kind of mindset in our children, and that better transitions to Aqua. After the death of Aqua focuses on just being an avenger. He devotes his entire life growing up all the way to the point where to where he's a teenager trying to avenge learning about who his father was, all for the sake of getting into the entertainment industry and finding the murderer. He focuses his entire time. He even enters as an actor just for the sake of that, even though when other people tell him he has a talent for acting, he can't even see it for himself, that he has an option of being a professional actor himself. All he does is that he sees acting and the roles that he plays as a tool to achieve his goal of fulfilling his self-imposed primary role of being the Avenger. And this causes him to manipulate people like Akane, Kana, even his own sister, into his schemes. And in the end, like, as of the chapter, I think, was it 162 and 161, 162, again, spoiler alert, if you've been warned again, he ends up going through with his revenge and attempts to even take out the murderer by killing himself, by dying with the murderer. So, like, and that's what makes Aqua such a tragic hero. Like, he knows that he's capable of being more, but he doesn't allow himself. In fact, in the manga, the personification of his previous life as Goro Amamiya tries to push himself, Aqua's other life, the personification of his other life, tries to push him to a different direction, to not having to take revenge and killing the murderer, because deep down, even he knew that he could have chosen a different path in life. And we don't even know what's the resolution of this journey, because there's still more to be discussed in the manga. But the fact of the matter is, Aqua literally locks himself, he deludes himself into this mindset that all he is an avenger. And this causes him to not only alienate himself from his loved ones, but from his own very self. He alienates himself from his own sense of desires and wants. And that kind of ultimately leads to the final point about bad faith, is that when people live in bad faith, when they encounter or realize that the possibilities that lay out in front of them, they often feel a sense of anguish or even the sense of alienation, because ultimately, because they chose to live this singular role and not branch out into the other possible roles that they could take, that said individual ends up wasting away their life in a very, I would say, melancholic and almost nihilistic way. This is why we often encounter nihilism in the Sartrean framework, is that we don't acknowledge the possibilities that are open up to us, and we cave into the despair of the fact that we've had was this one singular role, and that even that one singular role or station in life isn't the only path that we could have taken, or the only path that we can take. We could have taken many different paths. And that's the interesting thing that I liked about Oshi no Ko, was it really kind of honed in on this mindset, this idea that people are defined by their occupations. And that by focusing in on that occupation, you end up causing instances of living in bad faith. And again, that's kind of just the main conclusion of this series, that Oshi no Ko kind of allows us to, is a good series that it explores the idea that how certain kind of character, social, gender, and even occupational roles can cause people to reduce themselves as merely objects playing out that role, and not thinking conscious individuals capable of choice. And we see this throughout the series. There's even examples of characters, when given the opportunity to change their roles, they've actually taken it and found happiness in their lives. Take, for example, Memcho, when, even though she's 25 in the series, and she was given this deception that she couldn't be an idol, she can only be an idol up to 20 years old. She was given the opportunity to be an idol. And when she took that opportunity, she was able to live out her passions. And that's the thing about bad faith, is that oftentimes we let certain characteristics, but those facticities about ourselves, or even facticities about the roles that we play, dictate how we live. And when we make it our singular focus and make that the only part of the only driving force of meaning in our lives, we ignore the many different ways we can live our lives and diversify that meaning in our lives. So this is just me kind of just discussing what I saw in Oshi no Ko. There's a ton of things that Sartre discusses, such as the look, regard, the look and objectification that Oshi no Ko kind of also discusses. But that's another topic for another time. If you guys actually like this kind of video where I just talk about, just ramble and showcase, kind of like a slideshow kind of format about my ideas on my analysis of certain anime that I watch, leave a comment down below. If you guys like discussions like this, yeah, please let me know. I would love to know if you guys like me discussing anime like this, because I love anime and I love philosophy, and oftentimes when I watch anime, I start to kind of connect it to some of the philosophy that I've studied in my life. And I may not be as polished as many of the PhDs, masters, people who have a master's in philosophy or a PhD in philosophy, in kind of weaving the strands together, but that's something that I'm kind of working on, is kind of learning how to sorry, the mic keeps cogently weave those strands together. So I hope you guys like this video. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and before I close this video out, this should also be kind of a spoiler or a hint on what's my next Vice Shorts deck profile. So be prepared to see an Oshi no Ko deck profile soon. Stay on point, guys. Peace out.